Okay, we can get this meeting going. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Paternak. I'm the chair of the 2022 Nominating Committee of Bronx Community Board Number 8. We'll move forward with our meeting this evening. I'd like to just notice that the 5 members of the nominating committee are present. They are Margaret Della, Stephen Fruit, Omar Murray, Stephen Vasquez, and myself. We have 3 interviews lined up for this evening. From an organizational note, I'll just try to get a few things done very quickly. Our next meeting for candidate interviews is May 31st. We have 2 interviews set up for that evening. The first interview is going to be, I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. I believe Lisa Daub is coming in at 5:30 p.m. on the 31st. And then we have Stephen Vasquez, one of the nominating committee members, has stepped up and will be placing his name in for nomination of the Housing Committee. So we have those 2 interviews lined up for May 31st. That meeting will start at 5:30 p.m. We do not have a hard stop at that meeting, so we do have much more time to kind of discuss some of the business that we have of the committee. I did send out minutes this afternoon for last, what was it? I'm sorry, it was the May 5th meeting. Did everyone have a chance to just take a quick look at those? They're really not that significant.
Look good to me.
Okay.
Me too.
Omar, were they okay for you? Stephen, were they okay?
Yep, they were good.
Okay. So does anybody oppose to the approval of those minutes or have any correction statements, anything that they would like to add to it? Okay. Okay, so the minutes from the May 5 meeting are approved, and now we can move forward.
Dan, can I just ask an organizational question? Which are our 2 meetings that are currently scheduled?
Say that one more time.
What are the meetings that are currently scheduled after today?
Oh, yes. Okay, so we have 3 interviews today. Ramdat Singh will be the first candidate, and he is seeking renomination of the Parks Committee. Thereafter, we have Rob Jaklowski, who is seeking renomination for the position of secretary. And at 6:30 p.m., we have Joy Campbell Privateri seeking renomination for the treasurer position.
Yeah, I was actually asking about, that's great. I was actually asking about our next committee meetings.
Oh, May 31st. Oh, no, I apologize. I'm off a week. May 24th.
Right.
I apologize. May 24th is the next nominating committee meeting, and then it's May 31st after that. I apologize.
So it's May 24th at 6 p.m., correct?
I believe it was 5:30.
We set one for 6 because there was no stop time.
6 p.m. is the May 31st.
Oh, okay.
So we have May 24th at 5:30 p.m. That goes till 7:30 p.m. because there's a committee meeting after that. And then the May 31st meeting is at 6 p.m.
Dan, you just said 5:30 for the May 31st. You said Lisa's coming in at 5:30.
I apologize. Lisa is coming in on the 24th and Stephen Vasquez will be in on the 24th. I missed a week.
Okay. So on the 31st, it is 6 o'clock?
6 p.m. on the 31st.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move forward. Just one more item, just so the public can understand what to expect at this evening's meeting. We are conducting interviews for the positions of chairs and officers within Bronx Community Board 8. We have 3 candidates who are here this evening. If you're a member of the public, we will not entertain any comments. We will not recognize you in this meeting. So we make that clear to folks who are watching. I will also state, as I did at the last meeting, that these are candidate interviews and the public is certainly allowed and we are mandated to include the public in these meetings, but we do recognize and ask members of the public to just keep in mind that these are interviews and ask themselves whether or not, they should be here for an interview and whether or not they would want somebody watching their interview present as they are doing it. That being stated, we will now move forward. And we'll start. Ramdat Singh, thank you so much for coming in this evening. we appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to the nominating committee. The nominating committee this year, just so you know, asked the chairs and officers who were elected midterm to come in and be a part of the process, just because, being midterm, you really didn't have this last year. So we're going to open up the interview with the same way we have for the other candidates. And if you can just tell us, a little bit about yourself. What do you do in your professional life? What part of the community you're from? What kind of things drive you? Anything you want to tell the committee to tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, good evening. First of all, thank you all so much for having me this evening. So my name is Ramdat Singh. I'm a full-time teacher. I teach high school history and special education at the Riverdale Kingsbridge Academy on 237th and Independence Avenue. And I currently reside in the Kingsbridge area of Community Board 8. And I've had the privilege of serving as chair from half of the year, half of the term. And it's honestly been a pleasure. It's been a lot of work coming in mid-year, but I was able to catch up and definitely build a lot of relationships with parks and also get our committee rolling on various initiatives that have been coming towards or coming before the committee actually, and also getting to get to work with the office staff a little bit more, developing that relationship and making sure that our parks are being maintained and groomed in a way that everyone can enjoy it in a safe manner.
Okay, we appreciate that. I guess the first question I'm going to ask for you is, you got into it a little bit, but why do you want to be the parks chair? Why this committee? Why chair?
Yeah, so, CBA has many parks. It has, Seton Park, it has Bruss Park, Van Cortlandt Park, and everything in between, Jerome Reservoir, the parks around there. And, when I stepped up to be or fill the vacancy for parks chair mid-year, I did mention that, I do enjoy our parks a lot. And one thing is I wanted to make sure that there was equity of, staffing and cleaning of all the parks around CBA, including, Bailey Playground and the maintenance of the parks by Jerome Reservoir as well. And when I stepped up into this role, I, I've been accomplishing that as well. One thing that we did new this year that a lot of the parks groups have commended the committee on is the fact that we invited them all to hear from them during our budget, capital, and expense discussions. And we had gave them a chance, before I heard from the committee members, gave them a chance to talk about their parks and talk about the needs there. So, essentially, I'm already accomplishing the fact that I want CBA and parks to treat every park equitably and ensure that they get the resources they need.
Okay. Do any of the members?
When you were just referring, Ramdat, to parks groups, were those like friends of groups?
Yeah, there's like stewards of Bruss Park, stewards of Ewan Park. We had Jerome Friends and Neighbors, and I'm forgetting one of the groups that came. Obviously, Van Cortlandt Park Alliance is always present at our meetings. And I'm blanking on one of the parks groups that came to our committee meeting.
Have you been able to get the participation of the appropriate agencies? I believe it's, I'm blanking on the name of the department, the city agency and its Bronx counterpart.
Yeah, so anytime we have a request, we needed more information on something. One thing that I've got used to is know exactly which park staff within the Bronx to go to, whether it be Dan Reynolds or whether it be Mike Ortiz or Joe Magnieri, or even Stephanie Ehrlich, who oversees Van Cortlandt Park. So one thing I've, began to do is, if there's an issue with, in Van Cortlandt Park, I'm like, hey, Stephanie, this is happening there. What can we do to solve this issue? Anytime there's a graffiti issue, I'm like, hey, Joe, like there's this graffiti in this park. Can we get your crew out to clean it up? And, parks have been really responsive to a lot of the inquiries that we've been putting out in regards to maintenance and, graffiti cleanup that we've, either we've put in an inquiry or there has been a 311 complaint.
Thank you.
Hi, Rambat. You mentioned expanding the conversation that you've attempted to do by bringing other groups into the fold. And I've also heard you speak in the past about expanding the accessibility of language or other ways to involve the community more in parks conversations. How do you anticipate continuing to expand that effort in the year ahead? And do you feel as though there's a need to modify or simplify or maybe expand the information that's provided during these committee meetings to make it more palatable or more comprehensive for the community?
So I know that if I'm reelected, one of the tasks that I guess we're approaching is whether or not our committee would like to be a hybrid model. And I'm super in favor of the hybrid model, because one of the parks groups themselves have mentioned to us that if we don't offer a hybrid model, they wouldn't be able to participate because of health concerns. And that's the stewards of Spine Dival. And I know that the task of hosting a hybrid model is going to be one there will be conflict, there will be sometimes internet issues, but one of the things I want to do is make sure that our committee is still accessible to the public. Parks, there's a park in almost every neighborhood in CBA. And it's important to hear from everyone who attend those parks, because there's so many and there's only so many committee members. And it's important to continue having that dialogue within the community to know what each park needs, and so we can help deliver for those parks specifically in those areas. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I guess the second part of my question is some committees, I think just the nature of the content is super complicated and layered. Have you found that is the case? And is there a need or an effort to try and have the content or the materials provided at the meeting more accessible for the community, either being more straightforward, or are folks able to wrap their heads around what's being discussed? I guess that's one question. And then how would you respond if they're not?
Yeah, so one thing that as a teacher, I'm pretty good at breaking things down. That's just the nature of the job. So when I'm, writing up the minutes or drafting of the minutes, I keep that in mind that, if this was in front of my students, would they be able to understand? And if I do use some of the jargon that parks or, some of the agency uses, I try to explain that in the minutes a little bit. One of them was about signage for ticks, right? And I know DPR uses, parks verbiage, and I try to explain that a little bit more. the one thing I do know is that when it comes to language accessibility, I know that we're not fulfilling that, language accessibility piece because our minutes are not in Spanish or any other language. And I hope we can get there one day, to make sure that, all of our materials are also translated in, the languages that are spoken here, whether it be Spanish or Mandarin or so on and so forth. Hopefully one day,
Hey, good evening, Ramdot. So one of the issues that, I see Community Board 8 have is trying to engage the youth within our community board. And engaging, I mean, having the youth attend, right, relevant meetings that would affect them, right? So being that you're a high school teacher, right, you having literally direct access to this age group on a daily basis, right? So how would you sort of how would you craft a message, right, to this age group to sort of like interest them to not only participate in the meetings, right, to attend the meetings, but to apply to the board, right, and to apply to your parks committee?
Yeah, so just, a little bit, I'm gonna answer that a little bit as well. But as being a teacher in the neighborhood, I know that all the schools, have a community service requirement, and specifically the school I teach in, right? So one thing that I've been doing is relaying a lot of the parks groups cleanups to our community service coordinator and saying like, hey, there's this park cleanup. And I've seen a lot of my students attend a lot of these community service, parks cleanups. And it's gotten to a point where a lot of my students and youth are actually starting to take, ownership of their local park. Like there's been a lot of students going to Breast Park and volunteering. I've seen a lot of my students get involved with Van Cortlandt Park Alliance. And, that's a good way to get them involved. And for the last 4 meetings, we've had one high schooler from Bronx Science attend. And then she ended up applying to the board. She's a junior in high school. And I think she told me she submitted her application because she wanted to be an active member on parks. So, we're already gonna have, hopefully, one high schooler on the board if BP Gibson approves it.
Gotcha. Omar, do you have any questions?
Ramnath, how are you? Good evening.
Hi, Omar.
Yes, hi. Good evening, Ramnath. How are you? My question to you is that since you have taken over as chair from the previous chair, Miss Ginty, who, by the way, she did a very wonderful job. What would you say was your greatest obstacle, and how did you overcome it?
I would say the biggest obstacle was jumping into being a leader on the board, and specifically in catching up with, everything that's happened before I came on. And we know that there's this massive project being done, the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook, and I had to do my own research, had to catch up on what that was about. Even though I've heard about it in the news, but I had to go through and look back at, the ULURP and all the other processes that took place before that. So I think the biggest obstacle was just me jumping in and having to just take a whole weekend and just read through minutes, agendas, all these documents to just catch up. And I just want to say that Rosemary and Bob and also Laura have been very helpful with me transitioning and hey, you may sending me things that I should look into to catch me up to speed, to be able to run these meetings efficiently, and for me to follow up on things that I need to follow up on that's been implemented, before I came on as chair. So I guess the biggest obstacle was me coming in mid-year and then having to catch up. But you know, I was able to do just that and continue to move the committee and follow up on things that, you know, have been passed and that are currently in procurement, and so on and so forth.
So it's a good segue into the next question, and that is, what do you believe the role of a committee chair is in running a public meeting, in running one of your committee meetings?
Yeah, so, you know, one thing I've been mindful of is there, like I was brand new to the Parks Committee, and there's been committee members that have been there longer than I have been on the board. And using them as a way to get some expertise and, you know, on certain issues, and using their voice to be able to determine what else is needed as well within the parks. So, you know, the Parks Committee is very collaborative. And, you know, I hope I am having that or spreading that spirit every month, of being collaborative. And, you know, it's not my committee. I never say it's my, like you know, when I talk about the committee itself, I never say it's my committee. It's because it's not. I'm just happen to be the chair, but it's our committee. Like we all take ownership of our parks. We all take ownership of the committee, and we all take ownership in the work that's being done. Like for instance, the committee decided that we should pass a resolution on the fact that the mayor's budget was underfunding the parks department. And, you know, I was like, okay, let's do it. And as we saw, and from the report from DPR, the Bronx personnel will be cut this summer and this year. And it was a really good step by following the recommendation of my committee members. So it's not my committee, it's our committee.
Ramdat, I have one final question for me is, and one comment. One comment is that you mentioned that you're in favor of the hybrid model for committee meetings, and I agree. But have you thought about potential or possible physical meeting spaces for the committee going into that new mode? And I say that only because I know I've heard a lot of concerns about squeezing into the small board office space, which also has the demerit of being toward the northern part of our community district. So on the other hand, I know it's a tougher sell to get people to invite meetings in during COVID. So I don't know if you've given that any thought. And secondly, are there any particular plans or initiatives that you would like to address this coming year, realizing that you've already done a lot in your mid-year appointment, both catching up and, you know, all of your involving the youth and community groups?
Yeah, so first, I have been looking into, you know, committee space as well, except excluding the office. Like I know our June meeting is another joint meeting between ENS and Parks. So obviously we need a bigger space. So I'm in talks with Bob Fanuzzi to find out, you know, what is the best location for us to host that, and I'll obviously have public input. But also I'll be looking at other spaces, working with Kira and Pablo from the office specifically to do that. And there are actually two things that, you know, obviously daylighting of Tibbetts Brook is one of the biggest projects. But one thing as well I want to push for is Bailey Playground. Bailey Playground is just a slab of concrete next to a highway that we are happening to call it a park, and it needs a lot of work. And that is an example of an equity issue and inequity within Kingsbridge. And there is that housing, I think is that Fort Independence Housing? It's the housing project right across from Bailey Park. They use that park as well for their family days and so on and so forth. And it's just it's not an appealing park. It's not a park. It's literally it's a slab of concrete with a playground on it. And that's one thing I really want to push is to redo that park specifically. And obviously, I've already talked with Deb Travis and with Bob Fanuzzi, and obviously there needs to be some environment and transportation worked into to make sure that park is actually a park and a green space.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I know that park very well. It's the Ford Independence Houses, which you're talking about.
Mhm.
You're correct. And I'd love to hear more about, what your vision is for that at another time. But you did mention a very big project which is coming out, which you've been working on, I know, which has been the subject of quite a bit of, discussion. And obviously you have a big meeting coming up next week.
Yeah.
And I guess my question for you is this: we've heard a lot about daylighting, and obviously it's something that would be great for the city of New York to daylight, to get that water out of the sewer system. My question for you is, the challenge I see is that, it's really a park, right? That's what the Euler created. And the challenge for you as a parks chair is bringing out the smaller park projects or the park-like setting that really daylighting is a part of. How do you feel as chair kind of bringing those projects out and getting the agency, specifically, the Parks Department, who is really involved with DEP as well, to bring those projects out?
Yeah, so that week, so I've been really involved in the project so far. That week that they did the presentation and also the walkthrough, I happened to be on, I think, spring break at the time. Yeah, it was spring break. So I literally gave up my spring break to be able to, be on, be on the tour. And I actually met with Stephanie after that, and we did another walkthrough. So I do think that the community board does have a role, and also the Parks Committee has a role to make sure that the Greenway specifically comes to fruition. And the reason why we're doing two joint committee meetings this month and next is to be able to get that public input. This is a massive project. There should be community input, and as a chair, I'm responsible for allowing or giving the public the space to be able to voice their concerns about the project itself and the design and plan for it.
Okay. I'm looking forward to next week's meeting to see what they present to us. I guess we're still waiting for them to send us something.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna follow up with them tomorrow to
Gotcha.
see where we are at in terms of getting this plan out and design.
Gotcha. Okay, do any members have any other questions for Ramdat? Okay, on that note, thank you so much for coming in. We do appreciate it. Take care. Have a great night.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Ramdat.
Take care. Okay, Rob, welcome. How are you?
Hi. Hi, everybody.
So as we stated in the notice, we're basically bringing in the folks who were elected mid-year because you didn't have the advantage of speaking to the
it's true.
experience of speaking to the nominating committee last year. So we wanted to bring you in.
Yeah.
And we're going to start. So thank you first for coming in.
Sure.
We're going to start the same way we have with everybody, and that is this: if you could take a few minutes, tell us about yourself, your professional life, where in the CB you're from, anything that you think is important that you want the nominating committee to know about yourself.
Okay, so I'm an English professor at the College of Mount St. Vincent. I live over on Johnson Avenue near 235th Street. And I guess, I joined the community board because I was always volunteering for presidential campaigns, usually, sometimes mayoral campaigns. And I did that on the cycle. And I thought that was, involvement enough, but the usual thing of kind of phone banking and sometimes getting on a bus and going to Pennsylvania. And then 2016 happened, and I thought I wanted to get more more practically involved on a more kind of organic, concrete level rather than just kind of big, showy, marginal involvement in a thing that was way beyond, anything that would have a practical impact on my life usually. And so I applied immediately after 2016, and I applied a couple times before I finally got, I think I was a mid-year replacement. And I think there's this evolution that happens where the first year I was just trying to figure stuff out. Like I was like essentially a spectator at the meetings, kind of trying to understand how the board worked. And then you get drawn in. Like, so in that first year, I helped work on the Parks Resources Guide with Laura and Deb Travis. And so, you get given a little project and you contribute a little bit, and then you start getting pulled more into the practical aspects of the thing. And then last year I was part of the Irving Gladimer Nomination Committee. And that's when I started doing what I do usually, which is be like a busybody. I'm the kind of person who walks up to strangers in Manhattan to ask if they're lost, like, do you need help? Do you need to find Carnegie Hall? And so I was looking around for people who might be good candidates for nominations. And so I got in touch with the people who run the community fridge down on Broadway to see if they'd be willing to accept a nomination. And it was a long back and forth and conversation, and they finally didn't want it. They finally said, no, we don't want anyone singled out. We don't want anyone highlighted. And then I was the one who kind of, then I lighted on the Van Cortlandt Track Club because I'm down there all the time running. And I'm on the Van Cortlandt Track Club, but I wasn't a big part of their cleanup efforts in the park. So I didn't really understand it. So I had to talk to people and figure out who was in charge. I was wrong about who was in charge. In fact, I had one person in mind, and it turned out not to be him. And so I worked with Stephanie Ehrlich to develop that application. She wrote chunks of it, and then I put it in the application and I brought it to the Parks Committee. So I was gradually getting more involved on practical things. And that's what I like. I like being practically helpful, or helpful in a practical way. And so the more I do that, the happier I am. That's why I like teaching, because it's like, I like to be helpful, I think is what it comes down to. And students are in front of you and they need help. And so that activates me in a way that other things don't. So that's, I guess, I'm also an associate of Sisters of Charity, which is like a volunteer thing where you kind of resonate with their mission. And I'm on their ministry's grants committee. So we look at grants and we give them out to deserving groups who are doing good social work. I'm a trustee on a symphony orchestra that I bring to the Bronx every year called the New York Classical Players. And so when I joined the board, I joined Parks and I joined Education and Cultural Affairs, because those were my two strong points, I thought.
Okay.
That was long-winded, but.
No, it was good. It was good.
Comprehensive.
Any of the other members want to start? Well, I'll start with a question here from one of our topics here. If you can just describe your views on transparency with respect to the distribution of information and decision-making process of the officers.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay.
I gotta say, at my college, I was the chair of the faculty senate. I'm apparently the life president of the AAUP because nobody else wants to do it. And so I'm constitutionally suspicious, and I always think there's some subaltern thing happening that I'm not aware of. And I'm often wrong about that, but that's my subject position in the world, thinking that there's something going on and I need to find out about it. So yes, I'm in favor of it. With the minutes, and I know minutes, it's so funny because there's that Tracy Letts play in New York now called The Minutes, where the minutes are, kind of a landmine of possibility. And so the minutes in their own way, right, like are a literal version of that. Like you try to be, I write transcripts essentially that then have to be edited back down to something that's less of a transcript. And so I'm trying to be fully transparent, but then that's too much. It's too much to read. It's like the detail's overwhelming, and you might get a detail wrong, as I have. And usually it's because people speak, Ramdat was talking about this, but they speak in jargon and acronyms. And so it's like or truncated words, negdec. Nobody ever says negative declaration. Everybody says negdec. Yeah. And sequer with a C and sequer with an S. And so part of it is trying to be personally transparent and getting everything into the minutes, but knowing that that's not ideal, because you need to sort of like process it and boil it down. And in some cases, I had to research to figure out what the difference between an environmental assessment and the environmental review was. All these terms of art that everyone who have long service on the board know, kind of instinctually. They know when they say this, they mean this. When they say that, they mean that. And one of the pleasures of being the secretary has been, frankly, the kind of, talking to Rosemary saying, oh, so what happened? What did I get wrong? And she'll say, it's like an education. She'll say, well, the state has this process and it's called this. But locally they have a different process and it's called this. And so I'll do research and I'll look it up and then I'll eventually get it right. And to literally get it right. And that's satisfying, right? Mostly because it was a kind of conversation with the person who was saying, I think you got this wrong. And then meeting what they knew to be the case and that I needed to be educated on. So, it's a little humbling, because I thought, I as far as I knew, I had it right. I thought I had it right, but I was wrong. And so I needed to educate myself. And so, yeah, I guess personally, I'm in favor of transparency. I guess sometimes, like in that case, I think it was the difference between environmental review and environmental assessment. It was me needing to do additional research to figure out what the difference was. But it's been satisfying, those kind of exchanges that happen, like in a phone call with Rosemary, where she goes, this is what I was complaining about at that meeting.
Gotcha. Thank you. Steve, Omar.
Rob, this is something that's sometimes it's a little bit of a harder question for officers, in particular secretary and treasurer, who have to kind of keep the trains running. That's a gigantic part of the job. But are there any in the mid-year, given your mid-year appointment in the less than a year you've been on the job, any thoughts about any plans or initiatives to either do something different or do something new or a different way to deploy your position?
Yeah, and this is everybody's complaint, is that the Zoom meetings, got a little bit out of control in the midpoint of the year. I think things are back under control now, but and this is underway in LRE, right? This kind of, how do we get the meetings when they're not in person to be more economical? What rules can we have for speaking order? And I know it's all really sensitive, and it's kind of a land mine, a field of landmines, right? Where you don't want to limit people's speech, but you also don't want people kind of monologuing and going on forever. And everyone should have a say, but how many say should they have? And if the meeting is ending at 11:30 and people are zoning out or logging off, then is that, serving the public? And so I would like to be part of some solution, either disciplining. And I'm not the kind of person who wants to, call time on people or say your 3 minutes are up or yield the time back to the chair. But I think it almost needs to be like something we keep in the forefront of our minds, that naturally happens when we're in person, because we all drove to that rec center. We all want to drive home and they're going to throw us out anyway at 9:30. It's all front of mind when you're in person, but when you're on Zoom and you're reclining in your den and you have the all time in the world and the bed is only a foot away, we might need to do something that's a little bit more practical. And I guess I would be the mechanism for that. And I guess I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't be, it's not natural to me, but I guess I would do it. Because I think that is a real problem with public involvement, even though we're really proud and happy, and we should be, about the 200 people who show up to meetings virtually. When it gets to those late hours, it's really rough. I think practically speaking, I could be better. And this is, turning it, I'm Catholic, so this is like a confessional, but the worst part of the job, somebody's gonna ask about that soon, is following up on missing minutes, right? Because nobody likes minutes. Nobody likes doing minutes. They're easily forgotten because once they're in the rearview mirror, they're in the rearview mirror. And so that necessity of like following up with people when the meeting minutes are missing. And there's also like a logistical problem because so they're missing when they're not on the website. And so this happened just last week and I'm thinking, oh, these two sets of meeting minutes are missing. And so I confer with the office and then immediately one of the minutes show up. They just show up in my email box and it's like, okay, they weren't missing. They were just, there was a little lag there. And so the kind of policing that is difficult. Like it's difficult interpersonally. You feel like a school marm. It's necessary because it was, obviously it was in the newspaper. That's the first time I made a, kind of an error that showed up in the newspaper. That was new. Usually my errors are undetectable because they're only, in front of students. And the students aren't listening, so they're not detecting my mistakes. But that's a real, and it's it's emails back and forth with Kira saying, are these in fact still missing or are they in process? Will they be posted later today? And so it's a lot of kind of negotiation to decide when, a simple thing like that seems black and white. But I guess I need to get better at that. And I feel like the mechanism could be better, more automatic.
Just quick follow-up. As part of your job, I think it has been at times with other secretaries to keep attendance for purposes of making sure that people who are taking a spot on the board are actually acting as board members.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing here at my desk when the meetings are going on. That's why I'm like silent because I'm like frantically counting the squares and seeing when people show up and doing attendance at 7:05, but then by 7:14 more people have shown up, and sort of looking at when it's finally the final number of people, like no one is going to show up any further, it's 29. But then that problem where it's a name on the screen, but you do the roll call and they don't answer. And so you have to call them or email them and say, during roll call, you didn't, and that again, you feel like, the kind of hall monitor that nobody likes, saying your name was on the screen, but when we did the roll call, you didn't answer. But then confusingly, you voted on the second item, but not the first item. And so, kind of, it might be that they're walking in and out and they're kind of paying attention to issues that are interesting to them, but they're kind of turning away when they're not. So that's, I'm the one in charge of that. And then that yields in the letter that has to go out to the people when there's a pattern of absence or a pattern, a pattern of absence essentially.
Thanks.
And that's not pleasant either. But.
Mm-hmm. So as an officer, have you thought about, your role in kind of getting board members to get more involved or to take on leadership positions within the community board? Yeah,
I thought a lot about that because I feel even when you're on a committee with someone, sometimes they're part of the committee in name, but they're not actively participating. And so I feel there's a kind of seduction involved, and I think it worked on me. I don't know if it would work on everybody. Where I was kind of like, I was drawn in gradually with like a thing that I could do. And I did, I was happy about doing it. And so it gave me a sense of kind of accomplishment and pride. And then I was ready for the next thing. And that next thing turned out to be secretary, which I was more, a bigger thing than I anticipated. But I feel like that method of the direct ask, can you be part of this committee to do this Irving Latimer thing, was very effective on me. And it was, or maybe the very first thing was, would you be part of the, the resource guide committee? And then I felt, satisfaction and involvement. So I feel like direct asks to people would be effective by, an officer or a committee chair. It's hard to say no because it's pretty comfortable being a spectator. That first year felt, I didn't feel like a lack of anything because I didn't feel like I knew anything. And so I didn't feel like I could contribute that much to questions about zoning. And because I was getting educated as the year went on and I was doing the workshops and the orientations. But I think I needed to be asked directly, will you do this? And then once I did it, I felt the satisfaction and I was ready to be asked again. So I think direct asks. And when somebody says, if you need any help, how people always say that, if you need any help at all, just let me know. And you should definitely then ask them to be on a committee, like directly ask them, or I should ask them directly. I know it works on me all the time. Just ask me to do a thing and I usually will say yes.
Hey, Rob. Good evening.
I see.
So given your position as secretary, right? So just to piggyback off of Dan's question with increasing participation, right? So his question mainly dealt with people from within. So how would you, right, use your job description, right, or your responsibilities to increase participation from the outside, right?
Yeah, I find sometimes, and when we say young people, all our minds go to like 18-year-olds, but we could use 20-year-olds, right? Yep. We could use 30-year-olds. That would be a young person, as far as we're concerned. And I feel like sometimes when I'm in UN Park, I'm always in UN Park now because I have a dog. And so I'm always talking to people in UN Park and I will say to them, I'm on the community board, and they'll say, oh, what's that? These are, active, involved people. And so you kind of tell them what it is and you say, well, it's, it's a group of volunteers that get together to discuss needs of the community. And then they're interested enough to tell you what the needs are. Like, we could use a fence here and they should clean up that garbage over there. But then I think that could also be a way to kind of seduce, again, them into wanting to be involved. And I think there's like a fine line. Like I work a lot with Julie Jenkins, who's the head of the stewards of UN Park. And she would be a really good board member, but she's stewards of UN Park, which is she's doing this volunteer thing that's a big thing on its own. And so I feel like every time I meet someone now, I want to tell them about the community board and like make that direct ask to them or let them know that it's a thing. Students are hard, like college students. I was thinking a lot about this today because I felt like this question would come up. And at our college, when students get involved in politics, they become like the spokesperson for Jeff Klein. Like they really get involved in politics, like Candace Giove or Jennifer Blautis, and one became a city councilman in Danbury. But it's hard to get them involved in like concrete, community-based, practical things. I don't know if it's at 20, they don't have the patience for it yet. I think they will volunteer at parks things, but joining community boards 2 hours every other week for a 2-year commitment for a college student. Yeah, so I would think that it would have to be me meeting people in the parks or in other kind of contexts and then making that direct application to them. Say, there's this thing and you apply for it. Usually you have to explain the whole thing to them. Like, are you elected? And you have to say, no, it's not an election. You apply for it, you get appointed. And you have to tell them that there are meetings and that they can even come to the meeting to see what they look like. They don't have to make a commitment, but it has to be this kind of gradual breadcrumb thing into the process. Because when you, on the face of it, if you say, would you like to spend 2 hours every other week at a rec room in a senior center? A 20-year-old will generally say no to that. I would say, until their commitment kicks in or their kind of engagement kicks in. And
It's also, yeah, it's also probably true that a lot of the college students, this is not their hometown.
Yeah, it's
They're
transient.
temporary, and so some of
Right.
that stuff is understandable.
Yeah.
Omar, did you have any questions?
No.
Gotcha. Let me just see what else we have here. So I guess another question that we do, I'll just kind of hit it, and you talked about it a little bit. What efforts would you make to attract a diverse representative of the community within the entire community board district? And you talked about getting folks, I guess, involved generally, but I guess in looking at a more diverse population, what efforts, do you think we can make? What can we do better?
Yeah. I mean, I think Zoom helps in a way because you think people have all these commitments and they have obligations and they have kids and they're working 2 jobs. And I feel like hybrid or Zoom, hybrid, not so much with all the rules that go along with it. I feel like I was briefly on, I was interviewing for the executive committee of the Benjamin Franklin Club at one point, and they had the same question, like, how do we get people involved? People from diverse backgrounds involved. And in their case, they just need to be more, I think, welcoming to diverse backgrounds. But in some ways it is, I would think, people who are like politically involved, even on I think that was the thin edge of the wedge for me too, like being involved in local political campaigns. I met a bunch of other people. So if we could use those contacts, and I've been at fundraising parties, I think with you, Dan, for candidates, that if you get people who are politically active, in the sense that they support diverse candidates, and then you can maybe talk to them about this thing that is not exactly the same thing because it doesn't have the same level of I don't know, competition or something involved. But to sort of say it worked for me too, to sort of say that's an exciting thing. It's exciting to be involved in a campaign and to win or lose, but this is a more practically kind of useful thing. And so I would say, again, for me, it would be a direct ask with somebody who's working on a campaign with me or on an issue with me, and to try to get them to make the application and pull them in. I feel like even on the community board itself, when I first joined, this was in person, right? When everything was in person. And Laura came up to me and talked to me. Lisa, Eric Dinowitz was then the chair of the aging committee. And I felt welcomed. I felt kind of, like seen, they say now seen, I felt seen. And so I feel like when you're involved in some campaign or organization and there's somebody who seems like they're a good fit, to just ask them, to be part of it.
Well, do any other members have any questions? Haram. Okay, well, again, thank you for coming in. We really appreciate it. We enjoyed the discussion.
Okay.
Thanks very much,
appreciate
Rob.
some of the
Thank you.
ideas.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you so much.
service.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And for doing these interviews, because I think it's clarifying for people to hear themselves outline what it is they're doing and why.
No, it's a lot of work, Secretary. We know, and we totally appreciate it. Keeping up with
Thank you.
everybody and chasing people like me. So thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye. Oh, very cute. Bye-bye.
So we have our last candidate for the evening. I see Joy has logged on. Joy, are you there?
I was muted.
Oh, there
that's
you
why.
are. Oh, okay. Welcome.
Well, oh, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
So thank you for coming in. As we stated in the email, the nominating committee wanted to ask those individuals, officers and chairs who were elected mid-year to come in and have a discussion with the committee.
Mhm.
So that way you can kind of talk to us. You didn't go through the experience last year. So this year you have, kind of the advantage of speaking to us, telling us a little bit more and conveying any ideas. So we're going to start with you the same way we did every other candidate, and that is this. If you can just take a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional career, where in the CB you're from, anything else that you'd like to tell us to help us get to know you a little bit better.
Okay. Well, thank you. I want to be treasurer. I want to continue being treasurer. That was never much in doubt, actually. So I am a traffic court judge. That's my day job. I have a side practice, arbitration and mediation. I'm also a court evaluator and a special master now for Judge Lyle Frank in Supreme Court. Let's see. I'm on a couple of boards. Essentially, I'm a lawyer and a judge. But what brought me to, if you really want to know something about me that you probably don't, because I don't think I attended one meeting in person as a member. I did visit before I was actually put on the board in person, but then COVID hit. So since 2002, from 2002 till about 2017, I spent doing palliative care for my husband and my father, and it was exhausting. I mean, there's no higher calling than how you treat people when they're sick or old or both. And so I know it made me a better person, but it was just exhausting. And I wanted to have a sense of myself again that wasn't tied to running to hospitals and rehabs and doing all those things that are necessary for the end of life experience. And I sold my home. I moved to Skyview, and it was mentioned to me like, well, why don't you run on the board? That would give you an opportunity to meet new people, and it would be apart from the more recent identity and 15 years of it. I mean, it changed me in both the best of ways and maybe some not too good ways. It tested my patience, but I loved them both, but it was hard. And I remember telling Ish, I want to grow something. I was hoping he would understand the metaphor, and I had to explain it a bit because, he's young and may not have experienced that part of the cycle. And I said, I just want to be a part of something where they don't know me as Bert's daughter or Bruce's wife. And although I didn't do it alone, but it was a part of the sandwich generation and that whole experience where you're just putting out fires and you lose yourself. And so that's what brought me to the board. And I had a particular interest in economic development and aging. The economic development, my side practice is certified as a minority women business owner by both the city, state, and port authority. And I believe so strongly that there is creativity and brilliance in our own backyard, and it's not recognized, it's not monetized, and people are not getting their share of hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, other cities and states make us look so terrible in that regard. And so I feel passionate about that. That was a no-brainer. So was the aging committee. But unfortunately on Thursdays, I have a late docket. And so it was never going to work. And that occasioned some of the shifts in my trying to find what another assignment would be. I really had my heart set on aging because I have so many thoughts, having spent so many years in that regard, although my husband wasn't as obviously as old as my dad. So that's why I joined the board. And it gave me a fabulous opportunity. I when I think of how quickly it happened that I moved and I found myself on the board, I couldn't believe I got chosen because I knew there were so many good applicants, and especially for the Riverdale. I believe I mentioned that I live in Skyview, so I thought, oh, there's no way. There's so many people up there that are probably better qualified and have deeper roots in the community. There's no way I'll get it. And so I was frankly astonished and very happy about it.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. I'll start with some of my colleagues. Does anyone want to start with a question?
Questions?
Omar, go. Omar?
Hi, Joy. Thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you.
So I wanted to know, like, what are your plans going forward in this role? I know you took over after Roz, and Roz did a good job. So I wanted to know, like,
Don't forget
have you
Dio.
been working with her? Dio, yes.
Yeah,
Dio.
my predecessor was Dio.
So I wanted to know, yeah, like, how do you find this role? How do you view this role? What new ideas do you want to bring to this role?
Well, I mean, I'd be less than candid if I didn't say it's still very new. It was offered to me. I stepped up. I put my hat in the ring, and I was elected. But I've only given 4 reports. I'm still learning. I have no problem admitting that it's been a steep curve. It should be. As someone pointed out at the election, this is an honor, and I never expected to be a walk in the park. I did not have the benefit of the training that I believe my predecessor had. And then also after the election, it coincided with the change in the administration. And so we were getting the budget late because obviously the mayor's budget was prioritized. So there's been a sense of catching up. The enormity presented by COVID, and the way that has prevented in-person meetings that I might have had, because I'm very tactile. I've always been a tactile learner. And so I've been somewhat at a disadvantage because of the way I process things. So I'm still learning, frankly, the breadth and the scope of what's involved. And Kira has been so supportive and a wealth of information. And even the questions that I've gotten, which I've endeavored to follow up and find out, what I wasn't looking for, what I wasn't, the issue spotting that I didn't understand, or connecting the dots. So again, to be transparent, I'm still learning. I know that the board has a very high expectation. I know that, this is a conservative board. There are concerns about expenditures and whether we're going to be ready for the hybrid model. And based upon what I know and what I've been informed, we are. We'll end up being the test pilot and really on the vanguard for, using the hybrid model, but that's necessarily going to incur costs, like the consultant that, Dan, you mentioned last week. And it's evolving. We really don't know. So this is a conservative board. It's whatever the opposite of antipathy is, that's what this board is. And it's a challenging role. But I know that there's a standard of having transparency and good bookkeeping and accountability. And so that's, in the short term, that's what I'm focused on.
Thank you. Stephen or Steve?
Hey, good evening, Joy.
Good evening.
So how would you, I guess, do outreach or given your position as treasurer, how do you think you'd be able to engage the community to increase participation in meetings?
Well, in my little enclave of Skyview, I do talk to people about attending the meetings. I evangelize because look, I'm new to Skyview, and and I feel like I've been welcomed and entrusted. So frankly, I'm a poster child for that kind of mobility and involvement. Most of our community board, well, I don't know that most, I don't know that I could quantify, but there's certainly a more affluent group that will do the heavy lifting for the people that don't get involved, that maybe don't have to worry about engagement. It's the other areas that do. And in general, people should not be apathetic. They complain enough, but they don't show up. And so I actually evangelize quite a bit and tell people, well, do you come to the board meetings? We're on Zoom, which they love, love, love. I'm telling you, that really is going to be one of the areas, that and social media, that is going to attract more participation. And I just don't see any way around it, because so many people can't logistically get to the meeting, and this would give them an opportunity to see what's going on. So I always tell people at Skyview, I'm on the board, people are talking about these issues, everyone's bitching, excuse my French, about, bottlenecks and traffic, and also the crime. I had a neighbor that I gave the link for the meeting this week, and to hear that the manager for the Key Food on Johnson was stabbed. I mean, just astonished. And she didn't see this in the Riverdale Press or any of the local news. And so that, in that way, I just say, well, look what I've been able to do. And so this is a board that's open to it. If they would take me, that you'd have just as good a shot. So, try it. So I've tried to. It's difficult, It's COVID has made a lot of people retrench. But I certainly try to evangelize and tell people, yeah, this is a board that's active.
Well, Joy, one, I'd like to say, no matter how long any member's been on this board, I think we're constantly learning every single meeting, every single month, and things are constantly changing within our community, within the city. So I completely appreciate that. I do have a question. We asked some of the other members as well, or candidates, I should say. Can you tell us any views you might have on transparency, with respect to distribution of information that you receive and any decision-making processes of the officers?
Again, I know that this has been an issue about whether or not, what goes on at the officers' meeting is going to be disseminated and complete transparency. It's a little bit outside of my bailiwick, but I will tell you that as much as is required, I believe we should be transparent. I mean, that's the best response I could have. What's required of us, I have no doubt that the chair and the co-chair and the secretary, I and the DM will do what's required of us, what should be required of us. I know that's a concern that came up at my election. And I perhaps at that time did not fully appreciate that this is a sticking point for some people. But I have confidence that the board is doing what it's supposed to do in terms of disseminating the information that it needs to.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to follow up with another question that we asked candidates as well. And that's this, you mentioned before getting folks involved.
Yeah.
So one of the things, that has come up, and a question that we do have as a nominating committee, is what efforts you would make to attract a diverse representative of the community than the
Mhm.
entire community district.
Mhm.
You know, we often talk about the four corners of the board. What ideas do you have? What can we do better?
Yeah. Well, as I said, the hybrid model is going to be, I think, paramount in the terms of the outreach. We have
Mhm.
to give people a plausible way of participating without having to worry about the logistics of getting from point A to B, especially if you're not retired, you have a job, you might have elder care, you might have children. And that's why I'm so pleased that we're going to commit to that.
Mhm.
I am, again, a poster child for diversity. Um, um, you know, I may not be what comes up in people's minds, you know, if they think of the typical Riverdalian, if, you know, if that's a word. But I've been embraced here. I mean, you find bigotry everywhere, and you also find classism everywhere. But as I said, I feel that social media, I think we have to, you know, Dan, when you talk about transparency, this is a board where people are very accustomed to using the levers of power. But
Mhm.
generally speaking, people have no clue as to what a community board is doing. They don't know what, you know, about it. They don't take the time, you know, they don't teach political science. They don't teach civics. So people just spend a lot of time complaining. In order to raise our profile, I think we're going to have a very robust social media presence to say this is what we are, get involved. And it also means not just Riverdale, not just Spuyten Duyvil or Fieldston, but Marble Hill and Kingsbridge.
Mhm.
Come along, see what we're doing. You know, we might have to be colloquial about it. Stop bitching and get involved. Because
Or come bitch here.
come bitch here, right? You know, it's I mean, it's because there is a sense of, you know, community board. Who's that? You know, what's that? And even I've spoken to lawyers that have no idea. You know, and it really is the first line for local government. And there's it seems nebulous and removed from a lot of people's lives. So I
I
would
would agree.
say as an
Yeah.
initial matter, social media and keeping that hybrid model.
And maybe we can get, you know, some folks to get involved and help. Maybe some of the staff to work on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Instagram, you know, and you got to go where they are.
I'm not quite at TikTok yet. Maybe you can get us
No,
there.
no,
Yeah.
no, neither am I. But I'm firmly in the IG camp, even though it's owned by Facebook. You know.
Well, thank you. Any other members? Do we have any? Stephen, Omar?
I just want to thank you for stepping into the role.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Especially given the learning curve that anybody would have. It's
Yeah, it's steep.
Mhm.
It's steep. And I have my own side practice. You know, I know what it is to go through this labyrinth of paperwork and jump through these hoops only to be told that there's a period missing, so the whole thing has to be rejected. You know, so I can get into the weeds, but as I said, I'm tactile, and I think when we meet in person, it'll be a little bit better. I'm also an introvert, so it's, you know, this is always a little bit difficult for me, but I was on the nominating committee and now treasurer, and you know, it's just I'm pleased about my experience, you know. And I remember when I was first welcomed and I said, oh, I can't wait to get involved, and someone said, oh, be careful what you wish for. And you know, here it is. So
Well, good. Stay involved. Stay involved.
I believe in that. I believe in that. You know, if you're gonna complain, you better be doing something.
Good. Well, unless anyone else has anything to add, Joy, thank you so much for coming in. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you taking the time and speaking with us this evening.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate, I would appreciate everyone's support. It's, you know, I'm stepping into big shoes, and I'll get there. You know, it's, you know, there's so many challenges in front of us. But, you know, what alternative do we have, you know?
For taking it on midterm, you're doing a good job. Just stick with it. You're doing great.
Thank you. I'm getting ready to have to prepare for the 5th presentation and then maybe do a little homework over the summer.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Joy. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And beautiful daughter, Stephen. Thank you all. All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Joy.
Okay.
Okay, so that concludes our interviews for this evening, with 10 minutes to spare. So I think most of our organizational business is done. And just to repeat, because I know I was all over the place earlier, our next nominating committee meeting is going to be Tuesday, May 24th at 5:30 p.m. And our next scheduled meeting after that is going to be Tuesday, May 31st at 6:00 p.m. So, does anyone else have any other business to raise it at the meeting tonight? Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Everyone agree? Omar, Stephen, we're good?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, guys.
Yeah, we're good.
Have a good night, guys. Take care.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye-bye.